Whenever I think of Robin Hood, my mind goes straight to the 1991 film Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, starring Kevin Costner. Now, the movie may not be a cinematic classic, but to me, the film really brings up feelings of nostalgia as I watched it as a kid multiple times throughout the early 90s. Now, I hold that movie in high regard, so naturally, when another Robin Hood movie originally arrived in 2010, I was surely curious how it would be. So initially I had mixed feelings, as despite Russell Crowe being awesome in Gladiator, I wasn't sure if he'd actually be a good Robin Hood. Now, after watching the movie, I have to point out that Crowe did good and was surely had a different feel than Costner. That said, this movie, it takes a much different approach to the Robin Hood legend, which is fine. There's multiple versions of the Robin Hood legend. Prince of Thieves, it follows the popular legend of Robin Hood, him being a rich kid, and Robin Hood 2010 goes in a different direction, showing Robin Hood as being a crusader who assumes the identity of Robert of Locksley, a knight who dies during an ambush. Now, it's certainly very different than the 1991 film. Still, though, overall, I thought the movie was pretty good. There were some things that I would have liked to see done differently, but the movie did a lot of things right and surely was well put together. Now, to start out on the positives for the movie, Russell Crowe, I thought, did an excellent job playing Robin Hood. He's just an excellent actor all around. He's not quite Kevin Costner. I'd probably go with Kevin Costner. That might be because I'm being biased here, as Costner was really my introduction to the Robin Hood movie. And if you're old like me, if you're over 40, then you might be in that boat as well. That said, I didn't think this movie really capitalized too well on the legend. It seemed like it was more of like how he becomes Robin Hood rather than the story, which Prince of Thieves, you get to see the story, you get to see him battle the Sheriff of Nottingham. Much of the movie, it seems to focus a lot on the politics, which I thought was a little bit overdone. Also, it appeared that this is more, again, a pre-story, and in the movie, in the end, we see him living out in the woods as a fugitive with Lady Marian and the other rebels. So how he became a legend, I would have preferred to see him after he already was kind of the legend. Maybe just, a quick intro in the beginning in terms of how he got there and started fighting the corrupt sheriff and not French soldiers. Also, the storyline in general, I thought it was a little bit too complex. It wasn't so complex I couldn't follow it by any means, but I just think that the plot of Robin Hood, it really needs to be him battling that chief nemesis, the Sheriff of Nottingham, and that should have really been the primary storyline throughout the movie. The Sheriff of Nottingham is pretty much an afterthought in this movie. He's barely in it at all, and the main villain is actually the prince who takes the throne, or the king who takes the throne from Richard the Lionheart, who dies. Now, in this movie, probably one of the other villains is an Englishman named Godfrey, who betrays I can't remember the name of the person who assumed Richard Lionheart's throne, but he begins raiding towns with French troops, demanding payment and slaughtering people. And that's fine as a storyline. I think it takes up too much focus of the film and also shifts away from what should be a conflict between Robin Hood and either some sort of villain. It could be the Sheriff of Nottingham. It could be, the newly appointed king. Strangely, again, in this film, the sheriff had very little power, and the nemesis, again, is that newly appointed king. And it could have worked, but it simply took really too long to get to basically the end of the movie. The conflict could have started small, and the tension and corruptness should have steadily increased. Shifting gears a bit, I want to talk a little bit about the supporting characters. Some I thought worked, some did not. Little John, played by Kevin Durand, was a solid addition, and he played his role well. Very underrated actor, been in some good stuff. So, same with Friar Tuck and Will Scarlet. Those were both cast terrifically. However, I didn't like Cate Blanchett as Lady Marian. She's surely presented much differently in this film than Prince of Thieves. In this movie, she actually joins the battle against the French, and she's got a much stronger personality, more hostile personality, I would say, than Lady Marian in Prince of Thieves. Although that's not to say that Lady Marian was some sort of pushover in that movie. Now, one final thing to point out is the final scene. I thought it was a bit strange. It's a good final scene for a movie, an adventure movie, but it was just a little bit weird seeing the setting of Robin Hood close out on a beach. You know, you expect the closeout scene, the ending scene, to be either in the forest or in the castle or something like that. I know in Prince of Thieves, it was at the castle where Sheriff of Nottingham resided, but it was a little strange, this being on the beach, and essentially you had the English fighting the French. Also, one other thing to point out is that, you know, Robin Hood really didn't see him display a lot of his fighting skills too much in this film. I thought, you know, his bow and arrow, we saw one scene where he really displayed it at the very end where he shot Godfrey as Godfrey was riding away. But I don't think that that is as memorable as Prince of Thieves, where we saw Kevin Costner shoot an arrow and split 3 arrows, essentially showing that he just was super accurate with the bow and arrow, basically. And we saw a lot of other cool scenes with Kevin Costner in Prince of Thieves where he, you know, got out the arrow, and I think he like pulled it out with his teeth, one of the feathers, and then he was able to sway the arrows and hit two people going 2 different directions. Pretty cool there. Anyhow, if you've seen this movie, let me know what you think. Did you think it was better than Prince of Thieves, or did you think this one was better? Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.